It's remarkable in Canada today how thoroughly this history has vanished, both in terms of the law about self-defense and about firearms, and in terms of popular understanding. Most Canadians would be astonished today to be told, and they generally are not told, that Sir John A. Macdonald strongly opposed gun control. For one thing, he said it was constitutionally entrenched right. The British Bill of Rights, 1689, we have the right to possess firearms. For another thing, gun control will just disarm the law-abiding. It will leave weapons in the hands of the rowdies. And federal Liberal leader Edward Blake was an even stronger opponent of gun control than Sir John A. Macdonald. Canadians have had guns from the beginning of European settlement here. They were common in the early 19th century. When you go to Black Creek Pioneer Village, you won't find them hanging over the fireplace anymore, but they were at the time. They were common in the late 19th century. They were common into the early 20th century. In one sense, they're still common today. Canadians do have one of the highest rates of private firearms ownership in the world, but they were far more normal back then. Before the First World War, Eaton's is advertising small caliber game rifles as the ideal gift for lively boys. Vancouver newspapers are running ads saying, "You will feel safe in your home or your store with one of our automatic pistols." There were some restrictions. We weren't meant to fire them off in crowded urban areas. You weren't meant to wave them around at polling stations. And periodically there would be temporary restrictions if the government was concerned about unrest in some area. And of course, Aboriginals were targeted. But for the most part, Canadians were not, although there were periodically proposals to go after other unpopular ethnic groups who were probably drunk to boot. It's really in 1920, on the basis of a spurious Red Scare and fears of these politically radical immigrants, that the government brings in strict licensing. It gets more strict. In the 1930s, both the Conservatives and the Liberals further tighten the rules. And then with the Second World War, gun control gets even stronger. In fact, by 1947, it's estimated that the government had fingerprinted about 20% of Canadians. And of course, after the Second World War, the push to denormalize guns, as well as to restrict access to them, continues. It's funny, especially that, the 1960s meant to be this big people power upheaval, results in a state that trusts the citizens a great deal less, including in this area, and brings in gun control measures not in order to prevent guns from getting into the hands of the criminal element, but because the ordinary person isn't to be trusted with them. In the 1970s, the RCMP says that you can no longer register a firearm at your place of business, a handgun, and that protection of property isn't going to be grounds for being given a permit. Obviously there's a great deal of detail to the story, and there's a good book on it, R. Blake Brown's Arming and Disarming, which I find remarkably fair-minded, given that he doesn't seem very sympathetic to gun ownership. But it covers the story from earliest days down to the present, to a situation in which you could have a Liberal Minister of Justice, Alan Rock, openly say that he came to Ottawa thinking that the only people who should have guns are agents of the state. By now, gun owners in a very real way are under siege because of this completely false conviction that the average person cannot be trusted with a firearm, and because of a long, slow, successful effort to restrict access and to denormalize it, to the point that we've forgotten that our heritage as a proudly free people has included from the earliest days that we had the right to arm ourselves for defense of our country, for defense of our community, for defense of our property, and for defense of ourselves. We end this documentary where we began it, with the crucial question, what kind of people are Canadians? Would anyone, including politicians seeking our votes, care to deny that we are capable, resourceful, determined, dynamic individuals, able to make big decisions about how to earn a living, how to raise our families, and how to deal with emergencies, including those that threaten life and limb, the security of the person, without which all other rights are worthless? If we're not that kind of people, it's difficult to understand why we're allowed to vote for those who will manage our affairs for us so much better than we could manage them for ourselves. But if we are, it has implications for policy in all kinds of areas, including that critical right to defend ourselves and to possess the tools and to make judgments about the tools necessary to exercise that right. And it's not just about policy, it's about the fundamentals. It's about understanding how the Canada that we love was built. We would not have tamed half a continent, created an open, welcoming society, and been a bulwark of liberty in the great global struggles against tyranny in the 20th century, if we had not been, quite literally from time immemorial, the kind of people who insisted that our governments trust us, who trusted one another, and who trusted ourselves, including with weapons. This is our heritage. It is a wonderful heritage. It has created the Canada that we love today. And if we want that country to remain worthy of true patriot love, then we must preserve that heritage, including that emphasis upon individual rights, the right of free speech and free assembly, the right to own property, the right to choose and control our governments, and the right to possess and use weapons to defend ourselves, our homes, our communities, and our nation. This is who Canadians have always been, and this is who Canadians must continue to be.
Thank you.